Thomas Sullivan, a quiet janitor at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, endures relentless harassment from arrogant SEAL candidate Jake Peterson during Hell Week. Unbeknownst to Jake, Tom is a decorated SEAL Team 6 veteran with a heroic past, his trident tattoo hidden beneath his collar. When Master Chief Peter spots the tattoo, Tom's classified history unravels, exposing his sacrifices. As Jake's cruel janitor challenge escalates, a dramatic confrontation looms. Will Tom's humility prevail, or will the truth reshape the base's culture? The story teases a reckoning that could redefine respect and heroism. Join American heroes untold to honor unsung warriors like Tom Sullivan. Subscribe to uncover hidden stories of courage and justice. Share your own tales of quiet heroism in the comments. Support our mission to reveal the truth behind the uniform and celebrate those who serve silently. Let's inspire together. At 5:30 a.m., the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California lay quiet under the pre-dawn sky, its silence broken only by the steady tread of Tom Sullivan. At 62, the janitor moved with a purpose that belied his age, his lean frame cutting through the morning chill like a blade. Every day began the same, a 5-mile run, a ritual carved into his life for 8 years, a remnant of the discipline that defined him. To the candidates, instructors, and staff, Tom was a ghost, a man who emptied trash cans and scrubbed floors, unnoticed unless someone needed a target for their scorn. But beneath his unassuming exterior, his hands bore the scars of a life few could comprehend. Each callous a story, each wrinkle a battle fought in silence. Hell Week's 5th day dawned brutal and unrelenting. The training center's floors were a testament to the candidates' suffering. Smeared with mud, vomit, and blood-soaked bandages, the debris of bodies pushed beyond human limits. Tom cleaned with a methodical grace, his mop tracing patterns across the chaos as if restoring order was a sacred act. The air reeked of sweat and despair, but he worked unfazed, his movements honed by decades of precision. He knew this grind, this relentless push against breaking points, better than most. He'd lived it once, though no one here would believe it. To them, he was just the old man with the mop, invisible until they needed him to clean up their mess. "Morning, sir," Tom murmured, nodding to Commander Hayes as the officer strode past, eyes fixed ahead, offering no reply. The snub was routine, as predictable as the tides. Tom didn't care. He knew the base's unspoken rules, knew that 70% of the staff drew straws to dodge cleaning duties during Hell Week's chaos. But Tom always stepped forward, not out of duty, but from a quiet understanding. He'd felt the weight these candidates carried, the crushing drive to prove themselves. He'd carried it too, long ago, in a life he kept locked away, buried beneath years of silence. His apartment, a small off-base refuge, reflected his Spartan existence. A table, a bed, a single drawer holding secrets no one at Coronado would ever see. 3 purple hearts rested there, their purple ribbons faded but heavy with meaning. Beside them, photographs captured a younger Tom, eyes fierce, standing among men whose names were now legends or ghosts. "The most promising young doctor I've seen in decades," his professor had said just last week, a fleeting echo of a path Tom had abandoned. Medicine had been his calling once, before the world demanded something else, something harder. This year's SEAL candidates were a storm of ego, led by Jake Peterson, a former college football star whose confidence bordered on cruelty. "You janitor!" Jake's voice cut through the mess hall, sharp and mocking. His friends, eager to bask in his bravado, laughed as he tipped over his water glass. Watching the liquid spread across the floor Tom had just cleaned. "Clean up on aisle 5. Jake grinned, leaning back, the center of his own universe. Tom approached, mop in hand, his face unreadable. Inside, he felt a familiar ache, not from the insult, but from the ignorance it carried. Jake's voice rose again, loud enough for all to hear. "My dad was Force Recon, said the difference between operators and support staff is some people just don't have what it takes." The words landed like blows, but Tom kept working, absorbing them as he absorbed the messes others left behind. The candidates escalated their game, spilling drinks and dropping food, turning their cruelty into a contest they called the Janitor Challenge. Whoever could make Tom clean the most won bragging rights and beers. Alicia, a cafeteria worker with tired eyes, watched from the sidelines, her disapproval quiet but fierce. "They've gotten 3 people fired already," she whispered to a coworker. "We draw straws to avoid their requests." Tom, though, never faltered. Last month, he'd asked for a schedule change for a VA medical appointment, a rare plea driven by necessity. The administrative officer had dismissed it, citing operational priorities, while approving new furniture for the officer's lounge. "Budget constraints," they'd said when Tom requested better cleaning equipment. The injustice burned, but he swallowed it, just as he swallowed the candidate's taunts, his silence a shield forged over years. Thursday afternoon pushed him to the edge. Jake, fresh from a punishing training exercise, stumbled into the mess hall, his face pale and clammy. He doubled over, vomiting onto the floor Tom had just mopped, the stench sharp and immediate. "Hey, trash man," Jake called, his voice weak but still cruel. "Made a contribution to your art project." His peers snickered, their laughter a dull roar in Tom's ears. He knelt to clean, ignoring the sharp pain in his right leg, shrapnel damage from a lifetime ago. His hands moved on instinct, but his mind wandered to memories he'd buried deep, the chaos of missions, the faces of fallen friends. As he leaned forward, his collar shifted, revealing the edge of a faded trident tattoo, its lines blurred but unmistakable to those who knew its weight. Jake, blind to the symbol, pressed on. "My bag costs more than you'll make in a year," he sneered, parroting his friend's taunts. "Bet your mother never taught you proper cleaning techniques." The words cut deeper than Jake could know, stirring a wound Tom rarely touched. "My mother passed away when I was 19, sir," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the first glimpse of vulnerability he had allowed. He straightened, tugging his collar to hide the tattoo, but not before Master Chief Harrison Peters, standing nearby, saw it. Peters's coffee cup froze midair, his eyes locking onto the faded ink with a shock that bordered on reverence. He knew what that trident meant, knew the kind of man who bore it. Tom felt the weight of Peter's stare, a silent question piercing the air. Without a word, he turned and slipped into the maintenance closet, his refuge of order amid the chaos. Inside, he arranged cleaning supplies with mechanical precision, his hands moving while his mind drifted to deserts and jungles, to moments when he'd been more than a shadow. The door opened, and Peter stepped in, his presence filling the small space. "Sullivan," he said, the name a statement, not a question. "I thought you looked familiar." Tom stood straighter but stayed silent, his past a wall he didn't breach. "Why are you doing this?" Peters asked, his voice tinged with awe and frustration. "Mopping floors for these entitled kids?" Tom's reply was quiet, almost lost in the hum of the bass. "Job needs doing. Someone has to." Peter shook his head, torn between admiration and disbelief. "I'll talk to the commander." "This isn't right." Tom's eyes met his, steady but pleading. "With respect, Master Chief, leave it alone." That night, Peters couldn't let it rest. In his office, he sifted through personnel files, his fingers pausing on Tom's. The record was sparse, pages blacked out with redactions. But one photograph remained. A young Tom Sullivan, standing among operators before Operation Eagle Claw in Iran, 1980. Their faces were grim, resolute, carrying the weight of a mission that would change them forever. Peters leaned back, the truth settling over him like dust, and wondered how a man like that became a ghost, hidden behind a mop and a quiet life. The weight of a classified citation hung heavy in the air, its pages cloaked in secrecy, only whispering of extraordinary heroism under unimaginable duress. Details were redacted, shrouded in black ink, but the rare SSBIPR code, denoting the highest security clearance, spoke volumes. It was a silent testament to a life lived in the shadows of valor. Peters, a curious soul driven by a need to uncover truth, dug deeper. He unearthed VA records detailing multiple surgeries, scars etched into flesh from combat trauma that no ordinary life could inflict. A name, barely a whisper, appeared on a classified memorial for covert operations, absent from the public's gaze. References to Desert One surfaced too, a doomed staging ground where 8 servicemen perished in the failed Iran hostage rescue. Each fragment of evidence painted a portrait of a man who had walked through fire, yet now swept floors in silence. Tom's mornings began early, the hum of fluorescent lights his only companion as he cleaned the base's facilities. But the peace was shattered when Jake and his cadre of SEAL candidates returned, their laughter sharp and cruel. Their janitor challenge had gone viral among the trainees, a twisted badge of honor. Videos spread like wildfire, capturing the candidates' glee as they littered hallways, smeared walls, and left chaos for the old man to clean. For them, it was a game, a way to flex their dominance over someone they deemed beneath them. For Tom, it was a daily crucible, testing the resilience forged in battles they could only dream of. When Tom reported the harassment, his supervisor's response was a cold shrug. "The customer is always right," he said, his tone heavy with resignation. "Just keep your head down, Tom. These are future operators. We can't afford to ruffle feathers." Tom's jaw tightened, his eyes betraying a flicker of frustration. "I've filed 3 reports already," he said, voice low but steady. The supervisor sighed, leaning back in his chair. "And they'll stay filed. That's how it works. That's reality." The words stung, not because they were new, but because they echoed the indifference Tom had faced for years. By afternoon, new clips circulated, showcasing the candidates' latest antics: spilled coffee, overturned trash cans, and mocking laughter aimed at the hilarious old janitor. Local news glorified the SEAL training program, waxing poetic about elite warriors while erasing the existence of the support staff who kept the base running. "That's the service industry for you," a fellow maintenance worker muttered to Tom, his voice thick with bitter acceptance. "You eat the abuse and keep moving." Tom's request for equipment repairs had been denied again, the memo citing necessary cost-cutting measures. Yet the officers' club gleamed with new weight equipment, a stark reminder of where priorities lay. That evening, Tom sat alone in the maintenance staff area, a space segregated from operational personnel by unspoken policy. The isolation was palpable, a quiet ache in his chest as he unfolded his sister's latest letter. Her words were warm, but the news was grim. The VA had slashed his benefits again, claiming his injuries weren't service-connected. The injustice burned, a slow smolder in his gut. His body bore the truth: shrapnel scars, a limp that worsened in the cold, and memories of missions that never officially happened. As he returned to work, 2 administrative staffers passed by, their whispers cutting like knives. If he was really something special, he wouldn't be scrubbing toilets, one said, her voice dripping with disdain. Tom's face remained impassive, but inside the words landed like blows, stirring a quiet rage he'd long learned to bury. The base newsletter arrived, its glossy pages celebrating excellence in service profiles. Exclusively operators, never support staff. The commander's column extolled the warriors' mission, their sacrifices, their glory, without a single nod to those who maintained the facilities. The omission wasn't new, but it gnawed at Tom's soul, a reminder of his invisibility. Peters, ever persistent, found Tom during a rare quiet moment. "Some serve in the light," Tom said softly, his voice carrying the weight of decades, "and others serve in the shadows. Now I just serve." His words were simple, but they held a depth that made Peters pause, a glimpse into a life of unspoken sacrifice. Peters's curiosity led him to a 1980s SEAL training yearbook, where Tom's face stared back from a team photo, young and resolute. Further digging revealed a staggering truth. Tom had been part of the original SEAL Team 6, formed under Richard Marcinko. His career spanned 3 decades, operations in 27 countries, missions cloaked in secrecy. An officer, unaware of the ears around him, let slip a reference to a Desert One survivor upon seeing Tom, only to clamp his mouth shut when others looked puzzled. The revelation was a fleeting spark, quickly smothered by the base's culture of silence. Later that week, the base held a memorial service for fallen SEALs. Maintenance staff were tasked with cleaning the grounds beforehand, but barred from attending. Tom watched from a distance, his heart heavy, as Jake and other candidates stood tall among the attendees, their voices loud with talk of joining the Brotherhood. The pride in their eyes was a stark contrast to the quiet dignity Tom carried. That evening, he cleaned the memorial wall, his hands tracing the engraved names of fallen SEALs with a tenderness born of shared loss. He paused at certain names, his fingers lingering, memories flooding back, missions, laughter, and the searing pain of watching brothers fall. Jake and his friends burst in, their voices jarring the sacred silence. "Hey, janitor," Jake sneered. "We need special cleaning for graduation tomorrow. Gotta look perfect when we join the ranks of real warriors." Tom didn't respond, his focus unwavering as he polished the wall. "What's wrong?" Jake pressed, his tone mocking. "Don't care about real heroes? Guess that's why you're just pushing a mop." The words hung in the air, a cruel taunt that failed to pierce Tom's quiet resolve. The next morning, as the base buzzed with preparations for the candidates' graduation, Jake and 4 others cornered Tom in the equipment room. "Hey, trash man," Jake called, his voice laced with contempt. "We need you to clean something special before our big day." Tom continued organizing supplies, his movements deliberate, ignoring the provocation. "I'm talking to you, old man," Jake snapped, stepping closer, his presence invasive. "Don't they teach janitors to respond when future operators speak?" Tom's eyes stayed on his task, arranging cleaning solutions with a calm that infuriated the candidates. One of them, emboldened by Jake's lead, kicked over the cleaning cart, sending chemicals spilling across the floor. "Oops, accident," the candidate said, smirking. "What's the matter?" Jake taunted, leaning in. "Too weak to stand up for yourself? Bet you never had what it takes." The door swung open and Master Chief Peters stood there, his face carved from stone. "At attention, candidates, now, Gil," he barked, his voice a thunderclap. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the candidates snapping to position, their bravado evaporating under Peters' steely gaze. The room crackled with tension, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy. Tom, still silent, began cleaning the spilled chemicals, his movements steady, a quiet testament to a life of service that needed no words to prove its worth. The room buzzed with tension as Master Chief Peters' voice cut through the air like a whip. "You have 30 seconds, he demanded, his piercing gaze fixed on Jake, "to explain why you're harassing this man." Jake's heart pounded, his earlier confidence dissolving under the weight of Peters' stare. Just having some fun or the janitor, Master Chief," he faltered, his voice thin. "No disrespect intended." The words felt flimsy, a weak shield against the storm brewing in Peters' eyes. Peters' face hardened, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "No disrespect?" He stepped closer, his presence towering. "You have no idea who you've been disrespecting." Jake's mind scrambled, searching for an escape, but Peters' intensity pinned him in place. The Master Chief turned slightly, his posture shifting to one of deference. "Commander Taylor, sir, I believe you should hear this." Commander Taylor entered, his expression grim, though his eyes held a flicker of something deeper. Perhaps respect, perhaps sorrow, as they briefly met Tom's. Tom stood quietly, his janitor's uniform plain, save for the faint tattoo visible at his collar. Taylor nodded almost imperceptibly before addressing the candidates. "Master Chief," he said, his voice calm but heavy. Peters pointed to Tom's neck, his hand steady. "Sir, permission to explain the significance of that tattoo?" Taylor hesitated, his jaw tightening, then nodded. "Proceed." "That trident," Peters said, his voice reverent, "isn't standard issue. It was only given to the original operators of SEAL Team 6 under Commander Marenko." Jake's face twisted in confusion, his mind struggling to connect the janitor before him with Peters' words. "Mr. Sullivan here helped form SEAL Team 6, Peters continued. 13 combat deployments, including the earliest counterterrorism missions this nation undertook." Jake stood rooted, his earlier arrogance replaced by a sinking dread. The other candidates shifted, their eyes darting between Tom and Peters. "He was part of Operation Eagle Claw in 1980, Peters said, his voice softening but no less commanding. "He survived the catastrophe at Desert One in Iran, where 8 servicemen perished. Classified missions across 3 decades, 27 countries. 3 Purple Hearts, commendations so secret they'll never be public. Those underwater infiltration techniques you struggled with last month, he created them. They're still taught because they're unmatched." Commander Taylor stepped forward, his voice quiet but resonant. After retiring, Mr. Sullivan didn't stop serving. He advised on classified missions as a special technical consultant. His role here, as a maintenance worker partly conceals ongoing security work. Silence enveloped the room, heavy with awe and shame. Jake's face drained of color, his earlier taunts echoing in his mind like a bitter rebuke. Peter's gaze swept the candidates. The man you've mocked, whose work you've made harder, has given more for this country than most ever will. His words struck like hammer blows, shattering the candidate's pride. Tom spoke at last, his voice soft but commanding instant respect. I don't need apologies, he said, his eyes meeting Jake's, but the other maintenance staff deserve your respect. Every day. There was no anger in his tone, only a quiet strength that made Jake flinch, his heart heavy with regret. Jake stepped forward, his voice unsteady. Sir, I didn't know. Tom's gaze softened, but his words were firm. That's the point. Respect isn't about who someone was. It's about who they are every day. Commander Taylor's voice broke the silence. Effective immediately, I'm instituting policy changes. No one, regardless of role, will be disrespected. His tone was final, his resolve unshakable. In a private moment later, Taylor asked Tom to remove his shirt. Tom hesitated, not out of shame but humility. As the shirt fell away, scars were revealed, jagged lines and faded burns mapping a life of violence and survival. Each mark told a story of battles endured, of moments where death had loomed but spared him. Taylor's eyes softened, but Tom's voice remained steady. These scars don't make me worthy of respect, he said, nor does my service record. It's how I treat others every day. The candidates, humbled, volunteered to clean the facilities before graduating, a gesture of atonement. Later, Peters found Tom by the memorial wall, his fingers tracing the name of Bobby Miles, his swim buddy from Desert One. Why didn't you say anything? Peterson asked. Why let them treat you like that? Tom's eyes lingered on Bobby's name. Bobby never came home, he said softly. He got a proper memorial, proper honors. He gestured towards the maintenance area where others worked unnoticed. Some get recognition, others don't, but the work matters. 6 months later, the base had changed. Mandatory training taught candidates to value support personnel. Jake, now bearing his earned trident, led the first session, his voice thick with conviction as he shared his lesson in misjudging a warrior. Tom reluctantly shared lessons in teamwork and humility with candidates. His personnel file was restored, his service record archived. Commander Taylor established the Sullivan standard, making respect for all a measurable criterion. The base newsletter's Heroes Among Us series highlighted support staff. Taylor wrote, Our character is measured not by how we treat the decorated, but those whose decorations we cannot see. Maintenance staff received equipment upgrades, and segregated facilities were abolished. Everyone dined together. An anonymous donation, rumored from graduated SEALs, funded scholarships for support staff's children. Veterans groups revised criteria to include all who served, ensuring no contribution went unseen. On a crisp spring morning, Tom Sullivan stood in Commander Taylor's office, his retirement papers clutched tightly in his weathered hands. After 8 years as a janitor and a staggering 40 years of service to the Navy, the moment to step away had finally arrived. The weight of those decades pressed against his chest, not with regret, but with a quiet pride that had long simmered beneath the surface. His eyes, creased by years of laughter and unspoken burdens, scanned the room, lingering on the framed photos of SEAL teams and missions that adorned the walls. Each image held a fragment of his past, a life few knew he'd lived. Commander Taylor leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady but tinged with reluctance. You sure about this, Tom? He asked, his voice carrying the warmth of respect earned over years of working side by side. We could use you around here. You're more than just a fixture, you know. Tom's lips curved into a faint smile, one that held both gratitude and resolve. Time for fishing, he said simply, his voice soft but firm. The words were a shield, masking the swirl of emotions he wasn't ready to unpack. Not yet. Fishing wasn't just a hobby, it was a promise to himself, a chance to find peace by the water's edge after a lifetime of service, both seen and unseen. Despite Tom's insistence on slipping away quietly, the Navy had other plans. His retirement ceremony unfolded with a grandeur he'd spent years avoiding. The base buzzed with anticipation as rows of former SEAL operators, legends in their own right, filled the hall. These were men who'd faced death in the darkest corners of the world, and yet they stood here, their eyes fixed on Tom with a reverence that spoke volumes. Whispers rippled through the crowd. That's Sullivan, the real deal. For years, Tom had been the unassuming janitor, pushing a broom through the halls, his head bowed in focus. But to those who knew his story, he was a giant, a man whose courage in classified operations had saved lives and shaped missions, only to choose a quieter path when the spotlight faded. Among the attendees stood Jake, a newly minted SEAL whose crisp uniform couldn't hide the raw emotion in his eyes. Just months ago, Jake had been one of Tom's graduating class, a young man hungry for glory, eager to prove himself in the crucible of combat. But Tom's words during their final lecture had shifted something deep within him. Courage isn't always found on the battlefield, Tom had told them, his voice steady but piercing. Sometimes it's in showing up, day after day, doing the work no one notices. Jake had listened, his heart stirring with a mix of awe and confusion. How could a janitor speak with such authority? It wasn't until later, when the whispers of Tom's past reached him, decades as a SEAL, missions too sensitive to ever be declassified, that Jake understood. Tom's final qualification essay, which Jake had read as part of his training, was a masterclass in leadership, not from the perspective of a decorated operator, but from a man who'd learned the truest lessons of service through humility. As the ceremony began, Tom took the podium, his reluctance evident in the way his hands gripped the edges. Public speaking had never been his forte. He preferred the language of action, the silent rhythm of a job well done. But today, the room demanded his voice, and for once, he obliged. My greatest honor wasn't in the operations that stayed classified, he began, his words slow and deliberate, each one carrying the weight of a lifetime. It was serving alongside Americans of every kind, men and women who did every job with the same heart, the same dedication. His eyes swept the room, lingering on the maintenance staff in the back, their faces beaming with pride. A cook, a mechanic, a janitor. They're no less than the operator pulling the trigger. We're all bound by the same purpose. The crowd sat in stunned silence, absorbing the depth of his conviction. For Tom, these weren't just words. They were the credo he'd lived by, the lens through which he'd navigated a world that often overlooked the quiet ones. The base had one more surprise in store. Despite Tom's protests, they unveiled a new sign outside the maintenance facility. Sullivan Support Center. His name, etched in bold letters, stood as a testament to his legacy. Tom's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and gratitude, his hand instinctively rubbing the back of his neck. You folks are too much, he muttered, but the crowd's applause drowned him out. Commander Taylor stepped forward, holding a shadow box that drew a collective gasp. Inside, Tom's faded SEAL trident, symbol of his elite past, rested beside his janitor's uniform, its worn fabric a badge of honor in its own right. Taylor's voice cracked as he spoke. This is who you are, Tom. Both of these. Always have been. Tom accepted the gift with a nod, his throat too tight for words. The gesture wasn't just recognition. It was a bridge between the two lives he'd lived, a validation that both were equally sacred. Later that day, Tom performed one final act of service. At the SEAL Memorial, a solemn slab of granite engraved with the names of fallen warriors, he knelt with a bucket and brush, teaching Jake the proper technique. Always work from bottom to toe, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. And take extra care with the names, they deserve that. Jake watched, his hands mimicking Tom's careful strokes, but his mind was elsewhere, grappling with the enormity of the man beside him. Here was a hero, not just of covert missions, but of everyday devotion, a man who'd chosen to honor the fallen by keeping their memory spotless. For Jake, the lesson wasn't just about cleaning stone. It was about living with intention, about finding meaning in the smallest acts. When it was time to leave, Tom didn't slip out the staff exit as he'd always done. Instead, he walked through the main gates, where a formation of SEALs, instructors, and maintenance staff stood in salute. The sight stopped him in his tracks, his chest tightening with an emotion he couldn't name. These were his people, his family, not bound by rank or role, but by the shared heartbeat of service. As he passed through, their eyes met his, each gaze a silent thank you for the example he'd set. Tom's steps were steady, but inside a storm of memories swirled. The adrenaline of night raids, the camaraderie of teammates, the quiet satisfaction of a polished floor. All of it, every moment, had been his life's work. At home, in the stillness of his small apartment, Tom opened a drawer he'd rarely touched. Inside lay his medals, their ribbons faded but their weight undiminished. He traced their edges, his fingers lingering on the cold metal, each one a snapshot of a younger man's bravery. Then with a gentle deliberation, he placed his janitor's ID card beside them. The plastic card, scuffed and worn, held no less honor in his eyes. To Tom, they were equals, tokens of a life spent serving, whether in the shadows of war or the hum of a mop bucket. As he closed the drawer, a sense of peace settled over him, the kind that comes from knowing you've given everything and asked for nothing in return. Tom's story didn't end at the gates. Inspired by his example, the Naval Special Warfare Command began reevaluating how it recognized non-combat personnel, those whose contributions often went unnoticed. Across the military, conversations sparked about the balance of visible and invisible service, about how a nation's strength lies not just in its warriors, but in those who support them without fanfare. Tom's quiet dignity had ignited a movement, a reminder that a civilized society is measured by how it honors those who serve in the humblest roles. For Jake, now carrying the SEAL trident himself, Tom's legacy was a guiding star, a call to lead not for glory, but for the sake of those who stood beside him, seen or unseen.